can't tell you, what this means to, I think, the whole WNBA community, to have her home safely. Basketball aside, by the way, this was just really emotional. I'm not a hugely emotional person, but I got very choked up and kind of knew for a couple of days that something might be happening, but you never know again until it happens. In that moment, and things, fall through at the last minute. So when it happened this morning, I just emotional, Doug, is all I can say.
Thanks, Doug. We'll now turn to Sabrina, and Sabrina, you will be followed by MA. Sabrina, go ahead.
Hi, Cathy. I'm curious if the WNBA had any plans for what to do next if and when Fiji was released.
Yeah, so obviously support her family, herself. Cheryl's on her way, I believe, to Texas, where Brittany's on her way to Texas. And obviously she'll be evaluated medically, and obviously give them their time and their space, and her reunite with their parents as well. And so, yeah, so we're obviously going to respect the privacy of this very, critical time in her coming back home. And obviously, I'd love to call her. I'd love to see her. We're going to give her the appropriate space and time for that. And then, follow again what Brittany and her family want to do about re-engaging with the WNBA and our players. So I know our players are very anxious to re-engage and reunite with Brittany as well. So we'll follow the players' lead. We're a player first league, and what they want to do is what we'll try to broker. But let's give Brittany some space and her family. It's been a long ordeal, horrible ordeal, and really look forward to her return and hearing her voice. And I always call her this gentle giant. Really look forward to reuniting myself with her, because she had written me a letter a couple of months ago, and since then, obviously, the appeal occurred and wasn't successful, and then she got moved on our election day, on the midterm election day, and so we've been monitoring it very closely ever since.
Thank you, Sabrina. Sabrina, we're going to turn to MA, and MA, you will be followed by Chantel. MA, go ahead.
Thank you. Commissioner, can you expand a little just on the synergy between obviously the WNBA, the union, the players individually, the NBA, the work you guys have done, probably a lot of it maybe behind the scenes over the last 10 months with the common goal of getting Brittany freed?
Yeah, Emma, I appreciate that question, because it has been a total team effort. I mean, we use that analogy in sports all the time, but we could not have done this without the NBA. We could not have done this without Brittany's agent, Brittany's lawyers, Brittany's the whole ecosystem around women's sports, women's basketball, sport in general. She's a star, one of the greatest players ever to play the game. So I think, the efforts of everybody have been helpful. The support has been helpful. The voices have been helpful. But again, this came down to the leadership of our government and our State Department, and they got this done. And I'm so grateful to them. But it was helpful to have all of those players behind her. NBA players, Steph Curry opened up during the ring ceremony this year, thinking about Brittany. Phoenix has the BG42 on their court when they opened up their season this year. Obviously, we did a lot of things during the season to remember Brittany so she wasn't forgotten. So again, team effort by everybody. I can't tell you that doesn't happen in every industry, but it happened here.
Thank you.
Thank you, MA. Chantel, you are up, and you will be followed by Eden. Eden, you'll follow Chantel. Chantel, go ahead.
Hi, Cathy. Wanted to ask you about your takeaways from the situation. What are your thoughts about players going to Russia in the offseason moving forward, and what type of guidance do you think the league will provide to players, or you personally? Since I know you talk to a lot of players, what will your thoughts be moving forward as to whether players should go there, how they should interact with teams when they're abroad, etc.?
Chantel, great question, because as you know, I've been a big advocate for letting the players do what they want to do with their off season. This is their time to figure out what they want to do. But we're also chipping away at the economic model and growing the league. And so we've tripled the number of player marketing agreements we did with players this year. And in order to do one of those agreements, they stay home here in the US. And so, and I think more and more of our players are taking other opportunities here at home, like, what Chene is doing with ESPN, Candace with Turner, Sabrina was announced working with Oregon, Skylar and Kia doing kind of broadcast things with their respective NBA teams. So, and many others. We've got now current WNBA players coaching you know, in both the G League and the NBA and at the college level, et cetera. So we're starting to chip away at that. I think our players are going to do what they think is best for themselves. And but we definitely inform them all the time of the security risks of where they might be playing. This just happened in Turkey when was that explosion in Istanbul. So, you know, whether it's Turkey, Russia, China, wherever our players go to play, Italy, Spain, Germany, you know, our players play everywhere, Belgium. We also have 23 players from outside the US who don't live in the US in the off season and play in Europe or live elsewhere from 13 different countries. So we're globalizing our game as well. So again, our players are going to do what's best for them in consultation with their families and their agents. And we're certainly here to help them think through the security risks and things like that. But I think you're seeing players take advantage of other opportunities, and we're certainly going to provide them more opportunities to do things with the league in the off season and keep the momentum going around the great play that they put on the court every year.
Thank you, Eden. I'm sorry. Thank you, Chantel. Eden, you're up, and you're going to be followed by Robert O'Connell. Eden, go ahead.
Hi, Cathy. Kind of following up on that question. What about some of the players that, you know, maybe don't have the name recognition or the star power to get those endorsements, those marketing opportunities? What ways can you kind of advise them or help them so that they feel like they don't have to go overseas?
Yeah, Eden, again, I think there are some opportunities here in the off season for them to either play here in the US or there's also internship opportunities that aren't part of big marketing agreements like the stars might get or endorsements from corporates, but there's internship opportunities to hone their skill set for what they do in life after basketball. And that was one of the reasons I even took this job. If for those of you that were on my presser in May of 2019, I said, one of the reasons I took this job is someone told me the average tenure of a WNBA player was 5 years or so. And I said, okay, they're college graduates. They're maybe 28, 29, 30 years old. Now, what do they do for the next 30 years? So we need to do a better job from the league of placing them in internships, in apprenticeships, in skill sets. Nike's been a great one to take WNBA players and former WNBA players into their training ground. And so we need to make sure our players know these opportunities exist. Now they're focused on playing basketball during their young years, I'll call it. And so not everybody's body's going to hold up like Sue Birds did for 20 years. But, you know, we're providing more and more opportunities to, should the players want to take those opportunities. But, you know, I know as a former D1 college athlete, you know, there wasn't a WNBA back when I came out, but if there was, I would want to play and play year round because it's such a passion. The game is such a passion for these players and they're elite athletes. So I understand why they want to play wherever out overseas here in the US, but I think the more and more opportunities we can give them here at home, I think, you know, the better off we'll all be.
Thank you, Eden. We'll turn now to Robert O'Connell. Robert, you'll be followed by Tarika. Robert, go ahead.
Cathy, is the WNBA going to take any steps now to support the pledges that Sherelle made to campaign for other Americans considered wrongfully detained overseas, especially Paul Whelan?
Yeah, so you might have seen in our statement, we shouted out Paul Whelan. I mean, he also wrongfully detained Americans. I've learned a lot about the process of how many wrongfully detained Americans we have around the world, not just in Russia, but other countries. So I think it's admirable that Sherelle and I'm sure BG and I know Trevor Reed, who was returned through a trade back in the spring, is doing a lot of that advocacy. And so I think it's admirable and we'll continue to support that. You know, but right now Brittany's on her way home and we're just hoping that my screen went blank, by the way, but okay, it's back. We're just hoping that we can get settled here with Brittany back in good physical, mental, and emotional health, and then, you know, support any efforts. But I will tell you, you know, it takes a lot of courage for leaders to do what the administration and the State Department did here, and so we're very thankful. And we know, I now know, because I had a front seat to this, how hard the State Department officials work, how hard the administration officials work, and I'm sure they're working hard. You probably saw Secretary Blinken a bit ago talk about the hard work continues on Paul Whelan, but this deal was on the table for Brittany, and you know, our government, you know, thought it was the right deal to do at that time, but I think they're working on all the wrongfully detained Americans, and we'll continue to support those efforts.
Thanks, Robert. We'll turn now to Tarika, and Tarika, you will be followed by Lindsay Schnell. Tarika, go ahead.
Thanks, Ron. Hi, Cathy. How are you? A quick two-parter for you. First, how much information had you been given prior to today to know that something like this was happening or something like this was close to happening at this time? And the second part of that is in terms of how the CBA is structured for mental health services, does the league have any plans or have anything that they can possibly consider doing to support Brittany's mental health coming back to the States after this ordeal?
Yeah, so I can just tell you that obviously I've been involved in this since the day Brittany was detained. I think it was April when she was deemed wrongfully detained, which was a very important designation for it to go to the part of the State Department called the Special Presidential Envoy for Hostage Affairs. And there hasn't been a week or a couple of days that have gone by that we're not in touch with this SPIHA group. We kind of knew earlier this week negotiations were intensifying and that a solution might be on the table. And it was in sight. And so I had a little bit of upfront, but again, recognizing with all my experience in the corporate world before coming here, very geopolitically complex, and a deal's not done until it actually gets executed and transacted. So it wasn't until this morning that we really knew that Brittany would be actually on a plane coming to the United States. But, you know, we knew there were some intensifying efforts and that the administration was trying to get a deal done for quite some time, since back in May, quite frankly. And so again, our gratitude, excitement, and everything from that perspective. And the second part of your question?
The second part was regarding mental health services. I know.
Yeah, because I get emotional when I talk about like what I knew a couple days ago. I was so emotional, and then this morning. So again, at the right time, we don't want to bombard Brittany. She'll get evaluation and care through kind of call it a repatriation system here into the U.S. Through the government resources, and we are here. The Players Association, I'm sure, is already working on this as well. We have our mental health resources certainly ready, but let's let her get home, reunite with her family, go through the processes that she'll go through, and then, you know, we're here. I think the players really want to see her, and they'll fly anywhere to go see her. So again, we're going to give some time and space, but you know, she'll know we're all ready to help emotionally, mentally, physically. All of that has to be evaluated, and then we'll certainly be there for her and use our mental health resources at both the NBA, WNBA to help in any way she may need, just like we have available for our players.
Thank you, Cathy.
Thanks, Tarika. We'll turn next to Lindsay Schnell. Lindsay, you'll be followed by Jonathan Tannenwald. Lindsay, go ahead.
Hey, Cathy, thanks for chatting with us. So what I was curious about is, can you give us like specifics on, did you wake up to this news like the rest of us did? I know that those of us who were on the West Coast, like I woke up at 5:30 to like 12 text messages from people. What time did you know that it was a done deal? And then you mentioned that she is headed to Texas. There's a reintegration center there. That's where Trevor Reed went when he flew home. Do you know if that's where she's going?
I don't have the specifics on exactly where she is going. As I mentioned, you know, we knew the negotiation was intensifying. We knew that there was some reach out on the other side because, again, as the Biden administration has disclosed, they've had a deal on the table for quite some time that they thought was a reasonable deal, but at the time did not get responses back from the other side. So we've known for some time that something was possible. And then it was within the last couple of days that, you know, I was made aware that, you know, this actually could happen. And I was really had this kind of anxious excitement about something happening, especially think about like with the holidays upcoming and like just to be reunited with her family at a time when everybody should be home with their families. And I know we have a lot of people sacrificing a lot of in our military, et cetera, but to get her home during this holiday season was great as well and good timing for Brittany. So so that's what I knew. Then this morning, I was expecting maybe something last night before I went to bed and stayed up very late and had flown in from Chicago and stayed up late. But nothing happened last night, which is why you never know whether these are going to happen until they actually get executed. And so then was in contact with the State Department this morning and our liaison to the State Department, who was, we knew Sherelle had been invited there very early this morning. So we knew there was possibly some good news coming. And obviously, then the president appeared with Sherelle and the press started reporting on the great news that Brittany was coming home.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lindsay. Just a reminder to everybody, if you would, state your name and your affiliation when you're up. We're going to turn next to Jonathan Tannenwald. Jonathan, you're going to be followed by Nick Hamilton. Jonathan, go ahead.
Thanks, Ron, and thanks, Commissioner, for the time. Jonathan Tannenwald of the Philadelphia Inquirer. I want to ask about, over the course of the time that this took in the many months, there was a lot of skepticism in the public that it would actually happen because they didn't see transparent and sort of tangible things. And dealing with Russia, maybe you were never going to get transparent and tangible things along the way there. But now that it's done and it has happened, and there was some reaction sort of this morning, oh my God, I can't believe it actually happened. Do you think that there might be a lesson in this for the fan base, especially the younger fan base in women's sports that hasn't been through something like this before, that the patience will pay off, that with it, sometimes these things do take a long time, but the patience is worth having, that they might not have been through something like that before? Thanks.
Yeah, it's a really good perspective, because I too had that perspective that, everyone's like, she has to come home immediately. And I was like, well, number one is she has to come home safely. Like, this is life here. And she's in a country not known to support, women's rights and LGBTQ plus rights and racial. So I've this from the time she got arrested, I knew it was geopolitically charged. And so I think there are some lessons there, but also, I mean, the support and the outpouring of love and sympathy and empathy for what Brittany was going through from the whole ecosystem. I can't highlight that enough. And the strategy. So I spent a long time in business, had government relations report to me, and public policy and in geopolitics is so complex today. And obviously we're divided in this country, and obviously there's a lot going on geopolitically. So with the Russian invasion of Ukraine, that obviously heightened the geopolitics of this particular situation. And so, yeah, it's a lesson to be learned about how complex the world is in which we live, the risks that we take in our everyday lives. And again, I think there are some lessons to be learned here, but the transparency issue, I mean, it's really important to have a good strategy, which I think her agent and her lawyers, and they should all be commended for this process as well, of having a strategy of how to get through the court system in Russia, and then how to get an appeal done, and how to get, basically Brittany deemed wrongfully detained. So all of those were steps that led to the successful negotiation today. But again, I cannot highlight enough the administration and the State Department, especially the Special Presidential Envoy for Hostage Affairs, for their strategy here. And look, it's really tough to go through these type of negotiations, and presidents get elected to make tough calls. Leaders get lead around very tough and conflict situations like this. And it takes a lot of courage to get these kind of deals done. So I got to see a little more than most on the thought process, the strategy, and again, overjoyed at the result today.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jonathan. We're going to turn to Nick Hamilton. Nick, you'll be followed by Jackie Powell. Nick, go ahead.
Good morning, Commissioner. Nick Hamilton, Nightcast Media. Thank you for doing this. My question to you is, obviously the league is moving into a 40-game season, which provides more opportunity for revenue and things of that nature. How extensive have the talks been, or are going to be, as it pertains to making sure that a lot of these young ladies don't have to feel like they're being forced to play overseas due to the economic value of playing overseas versus playing at home, and not having to deal with some of these things, unfortunately, that Brittany Griner had to deal with because of the strict rules and regulations of some of these countries they have to play in?
Yeah, Nick. So I talk a lot during, All-Star and finals and draft pressers about the economic model we're trying to build so that we can pay the players more, we can give them more of the benefits that we know they want. And obviously, just 3 years ago, when we were negotiating a progressive collective bargaining agreement, we added a lot of that, tripled the top players' pay. A top player can now make up to $700,000. The benefits are better, but we have to build an economic model. We're only 26 years young. We're not 75 or 100 or 110 like some of the men's leagues. And so we're working on that. I'm studying history. We're building rivalries. We're building household names. That's part of the player marketing agreements, is to really put a lot of money. We'll spend $1.5 million on that. We have a $500,000 prize pool that didn't exist before for the Commissioner's Cup. We bumped up our bonus pool for playoffs to $500,000. So, Nick, we are chipping away at paying the players more so that they have more opportunities here. We have internship opportunities. They're finding other employment. They're getting more personal endorsements because we've been throwing a lot of marketing dollars behind marketing them. So but Rome wasn't built in a day, as I say, and we need a couple more years of this transformation. As when I came in, I said it's a 3 to 5 year transformation. We hit the pandemic, that put us a little behind. We raised the capital in February. We're deploying that against a lot of things, bringing new fans in, building out our digital footprint and our digital products, hiring human capital to help us grow the league even more so that the players will be able to say, this is where they want to play. 40 games. We'd love to play more. Right now, 40 is where we are. It'll be an all-time high. Media exposure is so important for these players. If you build it, they will come. Last year, we had more games on national platforms than in our history, and should be no surprise. We had our most viewed season in 15 years, our most viewed playoffs in 16 years, our most viewed draft since 2004, since Diana Taurasi was drafted. So again, chipping away at all that, we still need some time for full transformation to take effect, and the deployment of that capital we raised just in February. But we're well on our way. But I understand the question. But again, I think some of our players will want to still play overseas because one, they're either from there, because we have 23 players of our 144 from 13 different countries, or they don't get a lot of playing time in the WNBA. It's highly competitive here. And again, as a former college athlete, I would have wanted to play year round when I got out as my craft, and they are the best in the world. So we look forward to working with them on an economic model to thrive in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. We will turn to Jackie Powell, and time permitting, we'll turn to Christos after that. Jackie, go ahead.
Hi, Cathy. Thanks so much for taking the time. I've got a two-parter, if that's all right. To follow up on your last point, I'm curious what you could share about those expanded player marketing agreements this offseason. And then I have one more focused on BG.
Yeah, so this was something that we negotiated in collective bargaining, is to do more around player marketing. We have to build more household names in this league. People are interested in the game, in content, but they're interested in the players and rivalries that you create. And so I think we'll have 10 plus players under player marketing agreements this offseason. We had 3 last year, again, in a coming into COVID and the Olympic year last year, we couldn't do much more than that. But now we can start to blow this out and really get players under these agreements. They already, like one of our players from last year's crop, like I was talking to one of the heads of one of the media companies, and he's like, wow, I really see her showing up everywhere. She's amazing. She's great. We'd like her to come on. So that's the purpose, is to try to get these players more exposure. So not just we pay them to stay here in the US, but also that they get to build their brands. And they get to connect with whether it's media brands or corporate brands and get endorsements. So that's the purpose. So then they can make more money. They'll stay here. They'll rest their bodies in the off season. They'll still train. A lot of them still obviously train all in the off season, even if they're not playing overseas. So that's our goal with those marketing agreements. And we hope to expand that even more next year.
Great. And about BG, I think what I'm most curious about is what did you and the league office not only learn about BG in the past 9 months, but what did you all learn from this whole situation in order to make sure that something like this never happens again?
Yeah, I'd say, look, this is a very complex situation with when she got arrested, with the Russian invasion of Ukraine, with the leadership in Russia. And again, I'm grateful to our leadership here stepping up on this. But, you learn you do have to have patience, as one of the prior questions we talked about. You do have to have patience, learned an enormous amount of patience, learned an enormous amount about strategy. I mean, there is geopolitical strategy that you need to follow in these situations. Sometimes you don't need to be out front of these issues, and sometimes you need strong advocacy around these issues. So certainly learned a lot about that. And then really just the one thing that I learned was, first of all, about BG personally. I mean, I had obviously spent time in the WNBA bubble with her. Also spent time with her even like when I first came into the league, and just how resilient she is. And although I didn't get to talk to her live, wrote her a few letters, she wrote me back. Just her courage in the face of this enormous adversity, which is what I put in my statement, because those are my words, like enormous adversity. And just the will to continue, fighting for herself. And I'm sure was thinking, primarily of her family and her friends and her players back here at home. and just learned a lot about her resiliency. And that's, a professional athlete has that usually anyway, because that's how they've grown up and trained, and you lose big games and you win big games. But this was beyond basketball, and learned a lot about her courage and her resiliency.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie. We have time for just 2 more questions, everybody. So I want to give you that heads up. We're going to turn next to Christos, and Christos, you'll be followed with the last question going to Christina Williams. Christos, go ahead.
Hello, Mr. Engelbert. Thank you for your time. Christos Chaldas, SDNA Greece. My question to you is, how big for the whole WNBA organization was to hear NBA stars like Steph, DeAndre Ayton, and more to speak loud about Brittney BG's case and make this case not only an American case, but a global case, because of the interest of the fans in Europe especially was really big.
Yeah, Christos, really, really good observation around the support. And that's why I did shout out the support of the NBA and the NBA players earlier, because we needed all hands on deck. We needed all the resources we can. The NBA players have huge brands, huge followings, as you mentioned, not just here in the United States, but globally. And it was really important to have their advocacy. And, I mentioned Steph Curry on the day of the ring ceremony, and when they're celebrating an NBA championship from the prior year, and he starts with shouting out Brittany Griner. Same thing during the ESPYs this year. He and others shouted out Brittany Griner. Dawn Staley, coach of national champion South Carolina, every day is tweeting about Brittany, as are our players. So it's great to have both NBA and WNBA players, and especially in markets where the WNBA and the NBA share a team, like in Phoenix, like in Brooklyn, Indiana, Minnesota, Washington. I mean, the players are really advocate. And I'll never forget Chris Paul on the Phoenix Suns talking to me last season about the ability to go shoot around with a Diana Taurasi, with a Brittany Griner, with a Skylar Diggins, and how important that was to him, especially because he has a daughter. So really important. And I think that was something that Kobe Bryant started, his advocacy as a girl dad, and that has really factored into not only the support when we were in our WNBA bubble, but certainly for Brittany Griner throughout this whole ordeal.
Hey, Cathy, it's Christina Williams with Girls Talk Sports TV and MSG Networks. Ever since you became the commissioner of the WNBA, you've been tasked with some of the most difficult situations, the CBA expansion, the pandemic, and now this situation with BG. What have you learned about yourself as a leader over these last few years?
So yeah, Christina, it's really been, when you take on leadership roles, especially a leadership role of a brand as important to society as the WNBA, you never know what you're going to be faced with. I certainly had no expectation of what I was going to be faced with, because I worked in I worked really hard for 33 years, led a firm of 100,000 people, had a lot of complexity, including geopolitical complexity, but nothing like what we faced here. I mean, everybody faced the pandemic, but live sports was even more unique, and especially a small league like the WNBA in a big sports ecosystem during that summer of 2020. And then the political nature of what happened in Georgia, the George Floyd, and the players stepping up, and the launch of our Social Justice Council. And then obviously this news about Brittany last February, and then culminating in the great news today that she's back, or coming back. So yes, I learned a lot about, just always using all of your energy around the strategy. And some of you have followed since I came into the league. I put a very simple strategy: player first, stakeholder success, and fan engagement, fan experience. And so every decision I've made, so I learned, like, a lot of times I have to go back and make sure that I'm following those 3 pillars of the strategy, because this brand is important. These players as role models are important. So I learned a lot about being an advocate, but also managing through crisis, and never a dull moment here at the WNBA, for sure.
All right. Thank you, Christina. And thank you, Cathy. To those of you who I was unable to get to, our apologies. But thank you for joining. We do have time constraints. Once again, the video will be available on the WNBA Content Network, and we will also be able to post a transcript. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you, Cathy.
Thank you all. Thank you for your support. It's a great day. Thank you. Happy holidays.